My name is Olivia. I am known as fabprincesscut on the internet. That is my username. And I am making my first ever sewing tutorial video. The reason why I wanted to make this video is because I have a love for Barbie, and that's what inspired me to become a fashion major at college in the first place. And so I decided to do this video with my friend, and you'll see her in it too, and just to spread the knowledge, because I believe in spreading education. And I know for me growing up, it was hard to find any good sewing videos at the time that I could understand. I have learned a lot from this process, as this is my first video. I know as I get further down the line that I'm going to just get better. So looking at my mistakes in this video, I can overcome that, and I hope you can enjoy it. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comments. But this is going to be a long one, so stay tuned to the very end if you want to see the official photos from our photo shoot when we went to Tokyo and Tulsa this year. So I hope you enjoy and hope you support me.
Here we have the bodice of Annalise constructed from the first draft, and the skirt is from an old prom gown repurposed for the ball gown of her skirt. Here we are cutting the draft bodice to make the patterns for the official bodice, which will include the lining, structure layer that will hold the boning, and the layer with all the details. When laying the pattern down, make sure you mark grade lines as well as notch marks. This will help when putting the pattern together. Also make sure you number the patterns as well so you do not get confused on where you put them or where they're at or where they go. Here you will see us lining the pieces up side by side, making sure notches match as well as the waistlines match each other. Here you see me taking out the zipper in the ball gown skirt of Annalise's dress. We are converting it to a waistband with hook and eyes for closure for an easy access to get in and out of the skirt. When taking out the zipper, it leaves raw edges. So I decided to take out my serger and serge those raw edges together and sew them down so that they are not showing. This helps from preventing your garment from fraying. Now if you do not have the serger, you can zigzag stitch and that will help. Here we have the official construction. You see me here laying out the pattern. This is the middle layer that will hold the spiral steel boning that I am using. If you are not adding boning, then you can skip this step completely. But make sure to pin everything securely so that you don't short yourself seam allowance. Now carefully cut out your pieces and lay them to the side. And be careful not to snip your seam allowance too short. The seam allowance is needed because you're going to sew it down later, and then you're going to put the boning itself through those channels. Now you're going to take your cut patterns, set them out, and depin them from the paper, only to pin them back together accordingly and line up your notch marks while you do so. This will create an easier fit, and it would be a more accurate fit. Now that everything is pinned, you're going to want to be careful sewing it together. Make sure that your needle and your sewing machine does not hit the pins, You're supposed to take it out. I tend to sew with pins in, though you're not supposed to. So just be very careful and make sure you sew correctly to the seam allowance that you have marked. If it's a 1/2 inch, sew a 1/2 inch, because it's very important, again, to have those boning channels correct. Here you see me serging some of the fabric on the middle bodice. I am serging the ends to the seam allowance, but I'm being very careful about not to cut off any seam allowance at all. Now, when you put boning in, there's a way that you can do it so you don't have to serge. You tuck it underneath, or some people just lay it out and you just sew on top and let it fray. I didn't want it to fray because I did not want to go back in there, so you see me serging the edges. Now here's what it looks like with all the seam allowances serged. As you can see, it looks nice. Now, if you don't have a serger, you could do zigzag stitch. Just make sure you don't sew through the seam allowance in the actual piece. Just the seam allowance needs to be caught. Here, now you see me cutting out the lining of the fabric. This is the part that will be laying against your body. This part is important because you do not want the boning channels to pop out and stab you. That will really hurt, especially if it's steel boning. So just in case if it does pop out, the lining will cover you, but it also adds a nice finish to the garment and makes it look nice and neat. And as you can see, that we're taking the first center front pattern and folding in the inch seam allowance that was in the front for the boning channels so we can put it on the fold so that it's just one thing and there's no seam in the middle. Also, when you're pinning the garment onto lining, make sure you leave enough room from the very top of the pattern and the bottom of the pattern. You see, lining fabric typically tends to be very slippery, and you think satin may be slippery. Well, lining is very slippery, and you could still pin it as tight as possible, and you still will catch some seam allowance. So when you have the top and bottom with extra, you can match up the pattern and have enough wiggle room that it will cover everything on the inside. Now you're going to do the same thing as you did with the middle layer and just pin it very carefully and mark your notches too. Just be very careful with lining. It's going to be slippery. It may take you a few tries while sewing it together and you may have to seam rip it and then sew it again. It's just a very slippery fabric. Now here is the final layer. This is what's going to be on the outside and it's going to be seen by everyone. As you can see here, I laid out all of my patterns besides the center front. For the center front is that golden rose decals that Annalise has, and so I left that to the side for the other separate fabrics. So you're just going to want to cut out your pink satin and make sure you leave enough room for seam allowance that is needed. As you can see here, everything is sewn together. We have the layer that's going to show on the outside as well as the middle layer there. And as you can see on the layer that's going to show on the outside, I have drawn some lines onto it. These lines is where it's for putting the white ribbon that is shown on her dress. We're putting those onto it there. You just got to make sure that it's equal on both sides, as well as adding the gold and darker pink ribbon on the front creases where the bust points are down to the bottom. That's where we're mixing those. When sewing, be very careful not to hit the pins, but also keeping the ribbon in place. Also take note that you are only sewing on the outer layer, not the lining or the middle layer that will hold the boning. If you have sewn on those, seam rip it out and lay it to the side. Those will be put into the garment later. Now we're on the middle layer, which is going to be the hardest layer. What you're going to do is, if you're putting spiral steel boning and any type of steel boning, you're going to make sure you put in lace tape, pin it down, then sew your seam allowance down onto it so you can insert those boning channels as you can see here. You want to make sure you do that carefully. Now after you have done those things and sewing the white part of the ribbon down, you're going to want to play around with the gold and the darker pink ribbon until it's to your liking, and then sew it on as well. Here you want to attach the middle layer and the top layer together. You're going to have to be very careful now since you sewn the boning into its channels. You don't want to sew with the sewing needle onto that boning. It will break the needle can fling and it can hurt you. So you want to pin everything down, and that's why we have seam allowance, and sew very close to the edge, because later on you can always fold it over and hide it. So you want to be very, very careful. Also, don't forget to try on the bodice and the skirt every once in a while and give it a little twirl every now and again and make sure it fits nice on you. Here you can see I attached the lining the same way as we did the middle and outer layer. I also added eyelets and the glitter tool ruffles for the top by the sleeves on the bodice. Now I'm adding bias tape to the seams on the top of that bodice so the tool doesn't scratch me, as tool can get very itchy against the skin. Here you see me making the ruffles for the bottom part of the bodice. I was using a lot of scrap tool that I had because I was limited, so I just gathered it out and sewed gold ribbon at the bottom edge and moved it around with the gathers until it fit perfectly on the bottom. Now here we have the final product. After months of labor, due to college mostly, I am finished. I am very pleased with how it came out, and I may change a few things in the future, but overall I am very happy with the overall product. Here we have Erica's draft already plotted out for the bodice, for the lining, and the layer that will hold the boning. Taking the center front bodice, we are breaking it in half for the white parts on the front of her dress. Also, we then take the new top that we split up, trace it, and then spread it out to make the gathers that are on the top of her bodice. Here you see me cutting up a pattern for the top part of the bodice that is spread out. This is going to be the white part and the gathers. You spread it out however far you want, or really however far you want it to be gathered. Like if you want it not gathered so much, you make it smaller. If you want it really gathered, you make it bigger. The more fabric, more gathers. And then we're going to lay it on top of that smaller piece you see there. Now we are dressing Erica's skirt portion of the dress using the slash and spread method. We need to have a triangular shape at the top where the pink and floral panels are. The rest of the panels will be blue. Another thing we are doing to the pattern is spreading it out enough to have a gather at the top portion. We only did this on the blue paneled layers. We are doing the same thing as we have done with Annalise. We are laying out our pattern and following the notes. We are cutting 2 of the blue pieces as the middle layer will hold the boning and the other part will be on the outside. Then we will be cutting the lining layer to go on the inside against the skin so the boning does not poke through and poke the skin. Taking our skirt patterns, laying them out accordingly. This I found to be the easiest part of making the whole entire dress, and also, personally for me, making skirts is more fun anyways. Here you see is we're taking the pattern and now putting it on the lining. The lining will help prevent it from ripping and fraying, but also if it gets dirty, it's much easier to get out. And the same thing with the skin, it's much softer on the skin, and it gives structure to the actual pattern garment itself. Here we are making the white part of her bodice. This will be the hardest part, but I found it the most fun. Take in the smallest piece and place it on the fold, as well as the other half on the same fold. It saves space in the long run. Make sure to clip notches and watch seam allowances when you trace it out and cut it out. Then take your pattern that you cut out to make the gathers for the front bodice, place it on the fold, and cut. Don't forget to take the previous pieces that you cut out already and put them out on the chiffon on the fold as well. Here I am taking apart the pieces and laying them out to view and marking notches as I go. I place the chiffon layer over the glittering polycotton. I will base stitch within my seam allowances all along the edges. This will keep the layers together when sewing the final product together. For the gathers, I pinned the edges together and the center, then pleated out until I was happy with the look. As you can see, I've stitched the bottom of my gathers already and around the panels. Now I will pin my seam allowances together and I will sew them. Now to make the ribbon part of Erica's dress, I just took a plain pink ribbon that I found to be the right size. I placed it with some pins and then I will stitch it down. The inside will not be seen since we'll be lining it, so don't worry about that. I placed boning within the channels as you can see, and to do that is like we did before with Annalise. And now I am placing the front with the middle pieces together and I'm sewing it down. Be careful not to hit the boning around the edges, as it will break your needle and the needle can fly out and hit you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. This means a lot to me. And if you would support me, I have social media links down below. But what I want to know from you is, what would you like to learn, and what cosplay patterns would you like to see me make for you? And then you can learn from that. So just leave a comment below, and follow me on my social media to help support me to getting better and supporting my dreams. Thank you!